biggest challenge for the future of this country is being waged not in our classrooms, not in our Oval Office, but deep in the bowels of our legal system. So to stay informed, it behooves you as a citizen to pay attention to what has been called the lawfare that is being waged in this country right now. And that's what this next segment is all about. Let's dive in on some of the hottest lawfare topics in the country this week. For today's segment, we look at Robert F. Kennedy Jr. RFK Jr. is running for president as an independent and was denied a place on the ballot in New York State in the upcoming election. The judge who ruled against Kennedy did so on grounds that Kennedy used a false address to register to vote in the state. Kennedy has been living in Southern California. In a post on X, RFK Jr. accused the DNC of waging lawfare against him and interfering in this election. Quote, this case is an assault on New York voters who signed in record numbers to place me on their ballot. The DNC has become a party that uses lawfare in place of the democratic election process. We will appeal and we will win. RFK Jr.'s father represented New York in the United States Senate. This betrayal of his old home state is salt in the wound. But is this really lawfare? Our next guest is someone who has gone up against lawfare attacks time and again and has fought for election integrity. Attorney and political strategist Zach Werrell of Blue Ridge Law joins the program. Welcome.
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Well, we've got a lot to talk about, especially on the lawfare front. But in this case in particular, the judge in the case is saying that Kennedy used his friend's address to register to vote in New York and has not stepped foot in the state. How does the judge know this in this particular case?
Yeah, so what happened is a group of petitioners who were paid for by the DNC, essentially through another organization, a PAC, they got a bunch of voters in New York to say, to challenge in court the aspects of his petition. And so the basis of their challenge wasn't that people who weren't real had signed or there was forged signatures of the petitioners. Instead, they said Robert F. Kennedy listed an address that doesn't qualify as his residence under New York state law. And so in essence, they threw out 150,000 otherwise valid signatures based off of an address that he put at the top. And so while technically by the law, he's incorrect, he used the wrong address technically by the law, but the fact of the matter is the legal system and the laws in place are often used to achieve ends that aren't in the interest of justice and are rather for some end, and that's lawfare. That's using the law in a manner to effectuate a political end. And in this case, the Democratic Party, which quite frankly, the only thing democratic about the Democratic Party is their name at this point. They found a little tiny error that is not substantial to invalidate 150,000 otherwise valid signatures and get him thrown off the ballot.
No, that's extraordinary that on a technicality that the reigning opposition party will stand there and say, we don't care what these 150,000 signatures represent. Rules are rules.
Right. Well, that's right. I mean, that's kind of the shield that people engaged in lawfare hide behind. In theory, the law is supposed to ultimately result in justice. And the problem is when you have a horribly corrupt state like New York, where the Democrats and Republicans, quite frankly, are in bed together, they passed these rules. And they didn't pass these rules to be so stringent in order to ensure competition and to make it fair. They passed these rules to make it very easy for them to knock out opposition candidates.
Well, it seems supremely ironic to me that the Democrat Party is limiting access to the ballot in a blue state against a Kennedy. There's just so many layers to that onion that you can't believe it's a real headline.
Well, you can and you can't. And so, again, with the Patriot Act, it was unpatriotic. With the Democratic Party, they're anything but democratic. The Democratic Party was behind trying to remove President Trump from the ballot to prevent the people from having a Democratic vote in a Democratic election to democratically elect Donald Trump. And they're engaging in the exact same tactics here. And so, again, they are going to hide behind the fact that technically the rule says that it invalidates the whole petition drive. But that's, again, an artificial construct designed to prevent actual competition and from democracy from functioning. And so, again, it's just rich that the Democratic Party is the one who nominates someone without a Democratic primary, who tries to knock the other two leading candidates off the ballot. They're not democratic at all.
Well, it's not democratic, but I guess it's proving that a party can keep someone off the ballot based on a technicality, despite what voters actually want. Bill Cotter from Barstool Sports, in his run for the New York's 3rd Congressional District, hit a similar snag. You were actually part of that campaign.
Yeah, so he called me with about 2 or 3 weeks left to go in the petition process. So our backs were up against the wall. And we collected a huge number of signatures, about twice as many as were necessary. And there were 4 other candidates other than the establishment choice. So Billy, the establishment guy, and then 3 other candidates. And the same 2 individuals, allegedly unaffiliated voters, filed challenges to everybody else's signatures. Somehow these 2 random individuals, one of whom lives in their mom's basement, by the way, they managed to go through, 10,000 petition signatures by themselves. Where did they get the voter database from? Where did they get access to the information necessary to do it? And most importantly, how did 2 people with 2 days have 200 man hours worth of work done? I mean, it's obvious that in that instance, the Republican Party, the Nassau GOP specifically, was using the rules again to create a selection rather than an election. And so I had my first run-in with the corruption in New York firsthand, and I have bad news for everybody. It's not just the Democrats that are involved in this. New York is just incredibly corrupt on both sides.
Well, that's so discouraging to hear, but also sadly not surprising. How many signatures again were overturned by how many signatures had been collected?
Gosh, we had, we were pushing 2,500 and you needed 1,250, I believe. At the end of the day, they managed to knock out like 1,700 of them. So, we didn't go through all the way to the end of the process. But this was very much lawfare. They have a methodology.
So you had rules in place. You could collect double the necessary signatures that are needed, and they set 2 attack dogs from basements to overturn it. Interesting. So it seems Trump also, I would say on the national side, so that's a chilling example, a local example, a small one. On the broader scale, you have President Trump, former President Trump, and he seems to have a few good breaks on the lawfare front after what seemed like an endless barrage of successful lawfare attacks against him from the left. But then he started seeing some wins. After the Supreme Court ruled in his favor, other cases have been delayed. How do these cases end at this point? And will they be saved and reserved depending on the outcome of the election?
Yeah, so there are many different lawsuits, so let's try to deal with them one at a time. So in terms of removing him from the ballot, those all appear dead. So all the stuff about claiming he engaged in insurrection, which I could go into for an hour and a half, why that's idiotic, but we'll save that. The other ones are, for example, the E. Jean Carroll case. New York passed a law to eliminate the statute of limitations so that anybody could file a claim that would otherwise be barred by the statute decades and decades after they happen. The reason you have a statute of limitations is you don't want to have claims that are super old with no evidence. And that's exactly what happened in the E. Jean Carroll trial. So, we'll see whether he has to ultimately pay that civil amount. When it comes to the other New York case, I wonder if we have noticed a common theme here. The other New York case with the felony fraud stuff, I mean, it's just totally ridiculous. They claim that he defrauded banks even by putting down information on them when the banks themselves went and checked the numbers and still offered him the loans. That's not fraud. And then they used a really bizarre mechanism to turn him from misdemeanors into felonies, which is they basically they said that he committed the fraud in furtherance of another crime, and they connected it to federal law, which we could have con law professors or civ professors
No,
on.
it's time after time they used their wiles, if you will, to just manufacture charges against Trump, and they had to really use legal gymnastics to get it done. But it'll be interesting to see how the election affects the way these guys commit their lawfare, the way that they proceed here. So, Zach, we're out of time, but we look forward to catching up with you again soon on some of these other issues and really breaking it down for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
For all our viewers asking where One America News is heading in the future, we would like to introduce you to OAN Live. OAN Live is the best way to stay up to date on all of the hard-hitting, straight-shooting, national and international headlines. And the best part is, OAN Live is only $4.99 per month. All the credible, honest, unbiased reporting One America News offers at a fraction of the cost of cable. Just go to OANN.com to easily sign up for OAN Live and stay informed.